are now tuned in to the OSINT Curious podcast.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the OSINT Curious Webcast podcast. I am one of your hosts today, Micah Hoffman. I go by Web Breacher, and I'd like to introduce to you my co-host for today.
Hi, that's OSINT guy here.
Dutch OSINT guy. Nice to talk with you here. So we've got a pretty neat show today. We're going to start off doing some news, as we do most shows. We don't have a guest, so instead of just cutting this short, what Nico and I thought we were going to do is in some of the Twitter conversations that have been happening, people are talking about documentation a bunch, and how do we document, and what do we record, and what apps do we use. So Nick and I thought that it would be a good idea for us to just kind of show you some stuff. So today's episode is going to have some hands-on demos, which for the podcast people might not be so engaging. We'll talk about stuff, we'll describe things as we go through and use the applications that we're going to show you here. We'll try to make it as engaging as possible. All right? Anything to start out with, Nico? Any questions? Anything you want to shout out, or should we get into it?
Just go ahead, yeah.
Just go ahead. Cool. So we have some of our news from this past week. Now, we've been getting a lot of talk, a lot of conversation about these wonderful blog posts that we made, that TechNZ and Kirby, and I think you contributed to the Facebook ones on our website. And I hear that they're going to be doing probably a special webcast that is, that's going to be just about Facebook. So stay tuned for that, all of our listeners.
Yeah, should be awesome.
Yeah.
Because I know they're putting a lot of effort in it.
So Nico, tell me about this whole Dutch government putting all of their, what's in this ambulance, what's in this police car, what's in this tank, what is this?
It's the Tetris challenge, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, it just popped up like this viral thing. I think initially the Dutch police came up with it as the first ones, and they just lay on the ground and put their police vehicle next to it, and they just like to show. If you do hashtag Tetris challenge on Twitter, you can show them, and then people just give all their gear. But what my initial thought was, since I like to do open source intelligence, now I know exactly what they have in their cars. If you are not law enforcement, for instance, and you want to know what gear they have, but it's not Dutch law enforcement. It was the swimming brigade. It was the military. We have ambulance. We have military police. We have those survival helicopters, fire departments. Like every governmental body within the Netherlands started to do this, and now I've even seen Chinese
there's
cars and stuff.
Something up here.
Yeah.
So this is the original post over here. Sorry about that. Thought we were going through it. Here's the various Dutch agencies and stuff. This looks like something out of a kid's book. It really does. It's like, these are all the things that go into a Dutch ambulance. And look at the man laying next to his motorcycle.
It's just like those Playmobil or Lego boxes.
Yeah. And then people started getting weird with it. Like, I don't know, the dishwasher. And then here's one right here in I'm not sure, Japanese, Korean. I'm sorry, I'm not really great with languages. Here's one. This one over here has people catching, there's two police officers and they both caught a criminal in handcuffs, and he's in the car and stuff. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But you can see here this Tetris challenge, hashtag Tetris challenge. There's all of these different pieces of equipment that if you were to look into them, you could see what's actually, what gear is actually in there.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure that much matters with police and emergency vehicles, but, it is information that we can use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives you great oversight, at least, what they have in their car.
Yeah. And there's some great creativity here with some of these. All right. Well, that was just a fun thing. So, did you get a chance to read this Airbnb article on reverse OSINT usage?
Yeah, well, what I found really inspiring in this article by think it was Tokyo and Ray, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Smith Ray and Tokyo V2.
They their perspective on how to leverage, in this case specifically, Airbnb reviews, but also look inside someone's home for, well, maybe red teaming-ish things, but also you'll get a glance of the neighborhood, how people review the location and the neighborhood. So in general, it will give you a lot of information about the one renting out his or her home, but also giving away phone numbers, prices, reviews on the location. Like I said, it's just a whole spectrum by one platform, in this case Airbnb, but there are a lot of more platforms out there that rent out their homes for a certain amount of time, and it gives you so much pivot points and such. I think it was really interesting.
Yeah, one of the reasons why this came to mind and became such a big issue is that I think Trace Labs, the tracelabs.org website, and the good people that run the missing persons OSINT CTF, they said that somebody that was looking for somebody in one of their CTFs used a comment that was left on an Airbnb person's page that said, hey, this person who they were looking for had just stayed at this Airbnb. So yeah, there's some really interesting information here, and Airbnb and the other places that do the same type of shared space. What's it called when you do this? This is yeah, not a great word day for me.
Yeah. But also when you look, let's say you are a SWAT team, for instance, and you want to have a blueprint from inside the building because you need a raid somewhere and you don't have access to that material. You could look into the same street, because in 90% of the time, all buildings in the same street, especially when you look in the Netherlands, for instance, or in Europe, they're all like these same building blocks. You'll get a general glance inside, or at least where the elevator is, or where the door is to the second bedroom or the third floor, those kind of things. Gives you interesting ways to look inside.
It does. And one of the things that I think John Turbush and I looked into when we did a webcast of this stuff for SANS was we looked at some of the comments, and some of the comments were like, so you have a host and then you have the people that are staying, the guests, and they can both publicly comment and leave feedback for the others publicly, so other people can see how good a guest this is or how great a host this is. And I can remember one of the hosts said, hey, this person and that person were such great guests, you know, they looked like they were so much in love. And I was, well, what if that person is not actually married to this other person, and that person, one of the people or both people, have separate, you know, spouses and stuff? That could be really, really interesting as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
And get creepy.
And well, yeah, I mean, there's always the creepy factor when you have stuff that's OSINTing, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about this YouTube test profile cards that show users' comment history?
Yeah, well, it was more of that YouTube is experimenting or announcing a feature where they will list a certain user's recent comments on a certain channel, or at least your channel. They call it profile cards, and instead of being able to see who left comment on a channel over the past 12 months, now it will show it based on recent and comments on other channels. So basically it will say something like, hey, this user also commented this and this video with this and this comment, or at least that's what I get out of this article. And it just gave me, well, it could come in handy for OSINT investigations, right? Because when you look into someone and you know he's already your target because he made some statements or comments on a certain channel, I would love YouTube to point out, well, this user also commented on this and this and this video, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I get out from it. But they didn't release it yet. It's just an announcement that it will be published probably.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm wondering if this is like transparency type of stuff, like some of the things other social media platforms are doing to try to dispel some of the anonymity that trolls have. When somebody leaves you a bad comment, you're like, oh my God, well, this will allow you to see if they've done it on other blogs or other YouTube channels. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and also they wanted to prevent trolling with it, because now they will, if you have, for instance, you have this account you have been using for 10, 12 years and you use it normal, and all of a sudden you start trolling on certain channels, they will see you as someone who posts non-serious stuff because you also comment, which makes you less reliable as someone who comments. That's something they are, pointing out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you said this has not been released yet. This is just proposed. This is test, right? Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Well,
this comment triggered me a lot. They said, though not mentioned, the new feature also could help creators recognize some of their worst commenters, as well as meaning those who only show up to troll, derail discussions, or otherwise cause problems. So from that perspective, it's also like a censorship method, right?
Well, it's peer pressure. Hey, if you're going to say this on these YouTube channels, we're going to let them know that you're doing it not just on this channel, or you're doing it on others, and maybe not doing it on these other ones. But I mean, why wouldn't people just create create separate YouTube accounts? I can create my troll account, or I can create 5 or 10 troll accounts and just leave comments. And some of them, interesting stuff. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
All right. I pulled this one up. This is by a person on Medium named Recon Madness. Can everybody do OSINT? And the interesting thing about this is, he talks about cognitive bias and talks about, what does it mean when somebody is doing analysis. One of the things that we talk about on here and just in other places a lot is running tools. What's the best tool for this? What's the best thing for this? We don't talk a lot of times about the logical fallacies and the bias that can enter into our analysis and really derail an entire investigation. So I kind of think this is interesting here. What do you think, Dutch?
Especially that point, which you just point out, in my experience, the last 20 years and more, the most people have the fall pit of bias, and not reaching out to their colleagues or friends as a devil's advocate, because everybody can dig up information, but making sense of that information and analyzing it without bias, I think that's the hardest part. You can connect dots easily, but if no one ever asks you, why did you connect those dots? Based on what? Can you show me the crumb path you've taken to come to these conclusions? And why didn't you go that direction just to be a devil's advocate? I see a lot of people just jumping to conclusions and not being clear on how they came to these conclusions. And that, one way you can't even blame them, because if no one ever told them that every now and then you should check up on these things, and every now and then in each case you should check up on these things, or at least have someone, and probably 2 or 3 people, proofread your report, for instance.
That's a excellent suggestion right there. I know a lot of people can't do that because they are maybe the only person that does OSINT and all, but I malware Jake, Jake Williams for SANS, and a bunch of other people have given talks where they talk about removing or trying to minimize, let's put it that way, logical fallacies, cognitive bias, and other types of bias in their reports. And what they say is they have a trusted person that report goes to. Doesn't even have to be a cybery person. It can just be somebody that they trust to proofread stuff, and you can compensate that person for what they're doing. But it's one of those things where having somebody outside read that and go, the the logic doesn't flow, or hey,
Yeah.
you're jumping to conclusions or whatever it is, can really help.
I've also had examples of colleagues proofreading my work, but they were also in the same field, so they assumed I took certain steps, so they didn't ask questions. And once I let it proofread to someone who is in a whole different field, but can read critically and give feedback, they came up with suggestions or at least questions, which made me think, should I add a little more lines in my report to make it more clear the steps that I've taken? So sometimes it's really valuable to ask someone out of your own comfort zone, maybe, or out of your own field of experience to look at your material.
And just to let everybody know, we do have our wonderful attendees here that are helping us out with this webcast, and one of them, Ginger T, one of our regulars, says confirmation bias is a massive issue. He sees a lot of it within Intel, and sometimes that Intel makes no sense and has no context, so you can't even evaluate it, and sometimes you end up throwing away or discounting the whole thing because you think that conclusions were drawn from fallacious thinking. But it's hard. It's one of those things that you have to constantly train yourself to do, because even when you think that you've analyzed this from all the different directions, there still could be a bias in your analysis. So getting somebody else that's trusted, that's not even necessarily in your field, to look at it is a good thing.
Yeah,
if you can. And I like how this person, Recon Madness, goes ahead and links to your document or your Medium post here, OSINT is a state of mind, which is where you talk about how OSINT is less about tools and more about how you think about the data, how you think about putting it together, and tenacity and stuff like that, right? Yeah. You're a great writer, man.
I try to be.
Did you see this this video? I love these walkthrough, these tweet threads that are walkthroughs of analyses of content. Did you see this one by Nathan Reuser in Canberra? Yeah.
I looked through it. Yeah, it well, just like you said, it's I just love how people take you by the hand and show step by step how they came to certain conclusions, how they found out where the location exactly was and what happened. So it's just interesting. You can learn in 5 minutes the basics of geolocation in just 5 tweets, basically.
Yeah, and for those of you that are listening on the podcast, Nathan Reuser, I might have missaid that, NRG8000 on Twitter, published this Twitter thread about Xinjiang prisoners or detainees, let's put it that way, that are handcuffed and blindfolded. He says 300 to 400 of them, and it was posted in a YouTube video. And then what he does is he goes through and shows you, hey, based upon the footage that was shown, this looks like it was from like a DJI drone or quadcopter, and the interface is right there, so you can see what direction the drone's pointing and some of the other information that's presented in the interface. And what he does is he goes through and says, okay, well, here's where we think the picture is, but let's go ahead and look at this and analyze, taking pictures and doing all of the lining up of buildings and trains and stuff, and then looking at the orientation of the map and measuring the angle of the icon for what direction is north, and taking that degree, that angle. I mean, it's just amazing, the length. And what I really like about this is it's not necessarily magic, but he says many times in here, hey, this is a rough estimation. This is just, we're kind of using science, but there's a lot of guesswork that goes in here, because I mean, he's measuring the angle of an icon. If this icon was off or something else, he's imprecise here. But you know what? Getting close and trying these things out really paid off. Here he's got a Google Earth view of the area, and then a Google Earth area that's kind of the perspective is sent. The perspective is set to be very similar to the drone, but then he goes on and he shows you, like you said, with the chronolocation, he measures the shadow in one of the poles, and he figures out how tall the pole is, and then the angle, and then he has to figure out days when this happened. Yeah, it's cool stuff.
I think this is basically what OSINT Curious is about, right? Just looking at these little details, and now you have this DJI screenshot, and you see this icon, and this icon is pointing in direction, and his mind goes, well, maybe if I measure it, I can estimate. Well, and that's also what I think a lot of people don't know or underestimate when they start doing open source intelligence gathering, that it takes a lot of time doing a proper case like this, because normally you won't have detailed clues, and you have to go in one direction, and you get in the dead end, and you go 2 steps back, and you go the other direction.
Wait, Nico, are you telling me that even you, after doing this for 100 years, 20 years, whatever, you still have dead ends in your investigations?
No, man. I went on Amazon and I bought this crystal ball.
Nice.
I most of the time, I think like 50% of the time when I'm doing investigative work, I end up dead ends and just going back and taking it back, or sometimes even taking a coffee and overthinking if I missed steps.
Yeah.
And asking my friends.
And I think that's a very important part of being curious is the hey, I'm going to try these different things to find the location, the phone number, the IP address, the whatever. I'm going to try all these things. Some of them aren't going to work. They clearly aren't going to work, but I'm going to try them. I'm going to write down what I did, what I didn't do, and then go from there, and then see where that information that you get back comes from. And I think that's a great transition into the other topic that we wanted to cover today, and that's documentation. Because if you go into your investigation, Nico, and you try all these things, and then you forget what you tried and what you didn't do, because sometimes our investigations last days, weeks, months.
Yeah.
It can get very disorganized, and you can waste a lot of time and money.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I can share my screen and show how I, for instance, would use a mind mapping program to start my investigation and go step by step.
I have no objections, Your Honor.
Okay. Can you see my screen now? Yeah.
I see.
So this is Xmind, but basically whatever mind mapping tool will do. I like this one because just I'm used to it, and what I particularly like about Xmind Pro is that you can add in multimedia, and that's not something you can do with all mind mapping tools. What I normally do, I just create a new blank map, and I set the central topic, and the central topic is most of the time my case name. And what I always will do is fill in the date which I started, and I think it's the 22nd today, right?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So do something like this, and I'll give it the case name of the person or interest. And what I'll do next is I'll add in my intake, because normally when you do OSINT on a professional level, you'll have a client or a team leader or something like that, and they will ask you a question. And what I find important is to describe and do the intake within the mind map, because then I'll just set in here who's the team leader or the client, what's their question. And why I say what's the question, the question should be a question which you can answer. So it can be a question like, I want to know everything about Micah. That's just an impossible question. Well, it can be done, but normally people would have deadlines, or they want to have their report yesterday, because that's what they normally ask you. So you will ask, what do you want to know about Micah? Or what do you already know and you want to have extra information on? So That's the intake part. Once I know what the question is, I will also know, or at least most likely know, which sources can provide this information. So what I will do then is, well, for instance, they wanted to know, has Micah ever been in Amsterdam, the Netherlands? So the question will be, what sources can I come up with where it would be most likely to find leads or pivot points to find him or his devices in Amsterdam? So that could be social media. It could be maybe photos from news articles. And once I know that, I can look for specific newspapers or maybe Infosecurity blogs where they talk about where you've been for maybe conferences, but also I can look up your social media like an Instagram or a Twitter or something else. So I'll start adding in, I want to look up Twitter, but maybe I want to look for, on Twitter, I want to look for hashtags. And, let's do a H between there. And I want to look for videos and photos. So this gives me, in essence, a question. The question defines sources, the sources I can come up with. And when I do hashtags, I want to look for maybe event names. I want to look for, well, we know you instruct for SANS. Maybe we want to look for SANS. And maybe from SANS, we can look for, does SANS as a company have a unique hashtag for each event, which will pivot me into a SANS Amsterdam hashtag, for instance. Well, when I find photos, let's say photos, you want to capture them. And once you capture them, you can just add in here and you can add in a photo or you can make a note. If I looked up an event name, for instance, Micah in Amsterdam, and I looked it up on the 22nd, I can make a note. Where is my note button? Always want to let me look here. Notes. Here are my notes. Are the notes viewable now? Yeah.
Yep.
Now I can say 22nd September, looked up, hashtag no results. Because maybe tomorrow there will be results, but I keep track of what I've done. So you can do Micah in the Netherlands, because maybe you were in Amsterdam, but you just didn't tweet or photo the word Amsterdam within it. But we can make it up from the word. So looked up, make a note, looked up the Netherlands. And then found a picture of Schiphol, which is the Dutch airport here in the Netherlands. Airport. And we can automatically connect that as a relationship to the videos and photos. So you start kind of doing analysis. So maybe you want to find confirmation of this particular piece of information on another type of social media, let's say Instagram. And forgive my bad typing, because I'm typing on a new keyboard, which I'm not that familiar with yet. And we found a picture in a restaurant at the same date of the picture on Twitter. Then we can look into, is this a restaurant in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands? And we got that confirmation of that you have been in the Netherlands. So on and on and on you go.
So
and
Nico,
you can start building relations. Does that make sense?
yeah, it absolutely makes sense. Razvicek in the chat says, hey, do you actually put in that seed information that this is what I already know about the target or about the event? That goes in
So it goes in the intake. Probably the team leader or the client will provide you with initial information, which I call the starting pieces of the puzzle or pivot points. And from that point on, you will fill them in. So this is the research question, and the research question divides into actual questions. And questions is also looking for keywords, query building queries, but also gives you time to think over if you want to go back to your client and ask additional questions. So that's what we do. And also what I also do, because some people just don't have the money for a piece of software like Hunchly or the new Fortimo or Periscope, for instance, you can just screenshot and do whatever you want. So if I'll make a screenshot just right now of the screen that I'm having here, and I'll make the screenshot, but you get the idea. It will actually give the picture in here. And what the fun part is, still in 2090, 2020, a lot of customers, clients, team leaders initially want to have a report on paper. And that's where I think Xmind or a mind mapping tool actually is particularly handy. And you can just export this all into a PDF and they'll have a report, which I think should go as an attachment on your whole written out report, right?
Okay. Yeah, so you brought up a bunch of things. Can I go ahead and take the screen share back?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to show you something that you've already seen, and probably other people have too. I agree with Nico that mind maps work for the way my brain works, and I've created, along with the help of Steve Hall, one of the students in my class, this OSINT Maps mind map template that essentially takes what Nico was talking about, and it shows you that you can go ahead and just create a pre-configured template that instead of having to brainstorm every single time, oh, I could search Twitter or Weibo or Telegram, oh, I can do this DNS lookup. You can template that stuff out and have it in a standard operating procedures document. So here's the goals and scoping. This is what Nico was kind of talking about that intake. Hey, you know, what does the customer want you to do? When do they need stuff back? Can you interact with them? And then we have other things. Now, this is a little bit colorful, but yeah, it's something that you could easily download and do. And you could say, hey, if we have a video, here's the different places where we look up videos. And then on that data collection tab, this is a general data collection tool or template here where we are looking at just all the different types of things we could gather. But what you absolutely could do, and what I highly suggest, is do something like with what Nico's suggesting, where you work with your team and you figure out, okay, we're always going to do these things in our assessment, always going to do these 10 things or whatever, or have modules. Hey, when we look at Twitter, we look at hashtags, we're going to do these 5 things. We're going to search it this way. We're going to search it that way. We're going to look in archives, and take that out of a standard operating procedure manual or one of the other tabs of a mind map, and you can go ahead and just paste it into your document here and start using it. You don't have to recreate the wheel every single time.
I think this also helps when, well, for instance, I'm in the Netherlands, you are in the States. I can do my research and go to sleep and send it over to you, and you can immediately see what I've done, but most important, what I haven't done.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the nice thing about mind maps is that you're not limited to this shape. Nico showed how to do relationships, how to insert a relationship, and this is specific to Xmind, the application. There's other mind mapping applications that are out there, but this tool can do so many other things. You can just right click and change the structure of the entire thing. I'm sorry, right click on one of these objects, change the structure to something where instead of a regular map, it's a tree chart, and all of your nodes shift to being on the right. Or you
Yeah.
can change it to a timeline if you're interested in doing that. It's really flexible. The problem that I've seen with this is twofold. One, this doesn't work the way some people think. I've encountered many people that are like, this is just too many boxes, too many buttons. I don't get it. Cool. The other thing is, I find that depending on how long you've been doing the work and how big your diagram is, you will have an exported document that is so huge your customer and yourself can't ever print it out, because it'll be like 9 or 10 pieces of paper, and you have to put them up on the wall and tape them together to actually make sense of this, or everything's going to be really, really small.
Yeah.
So before you use any of the things that we're talking about here, try it out and try the full life cycle of, let me go ahead and play around with mind maps, see if it's something that I enjoy, see if it's something that it could work, and then try exporting, try saving the documents, try sending it to somebody else and seeing if they can open it, because it would not be a good thing if you did all your 9 hours or 10 hours or a week's worth of work in here and you got everything in your mind map, and now you have to copy everything out because the exporting is not good.
But still, you can do the same thing in a text document, a Word document, because I think it's all about keeping track of your cron path, but also keeping track of your mind's decision cron path. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Keeping track of where you've been and what you've done. For those of you that are interested, that the mind map that I just showed is on my GitHub, github.com/webbreacher/OSINT tools repository, and that's called OSINT_maps.xmind. Xmind is a free tool. We aren't sponsored, or they're not paying us to say this. I like it because it works on Linux, Mac, and Windows systems. It's a Java-based application, and it looks kind of professional when you do things. There's some other mind mapping tools which are also free, and they don't necessarily look as professional. And there's some that are paid tools that can do this stuff, and you just got to figure out what works for you. Yeah. So can I show something now? Because we talked about. All right. This is a fun thing that I do in my class, and I'm going to give it away here for free because this is just cool stuff. On previous webcasts, I'm not sure if we talked about using data scraping applications that are built into your browser. Like I have here Instant Datascraper with some type of information. Some type of information that we collect from the web is in table format, and there is a super simple, really easy plugin that allows us to harvest that data. Let me show you an easy example, and then I'll show you how we put this into some data documentation tool like Maltego's Casefile. I love this example because we can do it real world. I'm going to go to viewdns.info, website that I really like for doing DNS lookups, IP address, domain name lookups, and those types of things, but also for doing reverse whois. If you've ever seen me present, this is one of the things I always present because it's kind of fun. Let's just go ahead and take a look at something simple, like let's check out any domain name that is registered with an apple.com email address. Okay, so any domain name that has an @apple.com email associated with it in whois, this will pull it up. Let's take a look at what that looks. We're going to go to viewdns.info, reverse whois lookup. I'm going to type in *@apple.com. When I hit enter, there's a couple of things that happens. First off, you have to read the screens. It's exciting getting the data, but you do have to read the screen, because what you'll see is it tells you there are 11,965 domains that match the search criteria *@apple.com in the domain registry. But viewdns.info by default is only going to show me the first 500 of those results on the screen. So we've got a huge number of results we're not seeing. So read what comes back. It'll really save you time and money. let's go ahead and see how this Instant Datascraper app, it looks kind of like a Pokeball over here. It's got a red top half of a circle and then a white bottom half. So Instant Datascraper, I just click the button, and what it does is it looks at the web page and it says, hey, do I see anything in like table rows? If I do, it will highlight that. As we can see in the screen here, the rows of data that the application brought back are highlighted, and Instant Datascraper says, hey, I see this. Here's domain name, creation date, and registrar. Do you want me to save it as a CSV or an XLS? Yeah, let's go ahead and save it as a CSV file. And it says I've scraped 501 rows. Now we know that there's another 11,465 rows that are not scraped, but that's beyond the point of this. So what I've done is I have essentially downloaded all 500 of these records in a CSV. That CSV looks like this. I like making sound effects when I do this. It's more fun. All right, here we have domain name, creation date, and registrar. Nice. I'm going to delete the first row here just so that we can see what's going on. Hide that, and we're going to insert a table. Inserting a table here will allow us to organize the information. All right, cool. So we have information. Now, some of the information that we know about this organization is Apple, is that they probably use this company CSC Corporate Domains as their main registrar for their domains. They usually have some kind of connection or maybe a contract with them, and that's the official one. So maybe what our goal here is to find any domain name that is registered and not connected to that type of a registrar. All right, so we're looking for the GoDaddies, for the eNom, and other things like that. So what we can do is take this information and suck it into another documentation tool called Casefile. Maltego's Casefile, which is a free tool, requires no license or anything. You can download it from Perturba.com. It allows us to import a CSV and take that data that's in there and plot it visually. So another documentation tool that we use are relationship maps. Let's take a look at these three data and these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suck in and import a graph from the table. And it says, hey, where do I want to grab that from? Let's go to the desktop and here. So I picked up the file. It says, well, you need to tell me how to connect all of those different pieces of data. I'm going to say fully meshed. Hit next. It says, okay, well, I recognize the first name, the first column as domain names. It already found that. Second column, it says our GPS coordinates, and the third are domain names. Now, I think I've done a demo before where I show that this version of Maltego does not have like date. It doesn't have anything like that. So we just picked GPS coordinate because it's a way of mapping. It's all right. So we have three different columns here. The first row is headers, domain name, creation date, and registrar. Now let's pick the connectivity graph. So here the domain name is this blue globe. The name, which is really the creation date, is the green globe. And then the yellow building over here is the name. So let's go ahead and relate things together. I'm going to think that the way that I look at this data is that a domain name is registered at a registrar, and a domain name is also registered on a certain date. So that's how I'm going to connect it. So essentially, the domain name to registrar. So all I have to do is come over here and delete all of these back references, and all I'm doing is clicking once on the object and then hitting the delete key on my computer. And here we have our domain name connected to the registrar and domain name connected to the date. All right, now we hit next. Very, very important thing, especially if you have large data sets, is to uncheck this limit graph size to 10,000. By default, that's checked. So it will only import 10,000 records. Then I say, import it. It says, okay, I imported it. When we hit finish, it goes ahead and shows me my data. Now, this is one of the cool things about link analysis tools is that we can see all these little dots. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. We can see all these little dots. There's each of the dots represents one of those types of objects that we created, either a domain name, a registrar, or the date it was registered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click over on this layout view. I'm going to shift the layout around to be more organic. And that organic will put at the center those registrars, and you'll see the domain names connected to the registrars. And that allows me to really quickly find the outliers, right? Because here we have, this is definitely CSC corporate domains. It highlights it. And over here we have another CSC corporate domains, but it is spelled differently. It doesn't have the incorporated on the end. But over here you can see a GoDaddy. And over here you can see something else that is Mark Monitor. And so just doing this, and at the bottom we have these other ones. CSC Corporation Service Company. So just a little different. Here we have Corporation Service Company. So again, when they registered the domain, they called this one company CSC, a bunch of different names. So each one shows up as a different connection. But also over here we have Lex Synergy Limited for Apple Care and Apple BZH. So what I did was really quickly scraped a whole bunch of content, which that could be all you do for your documentation. Hey, I need all these records. You scrape them, you save them as a CSV. But then I took that and put it right into one of our other tools that people use for documentation and really showing links between things. And that's Paterva's Maltego Casefile. Casefile is free, works on Linux, Macs, and Windows too. And it's a cool tool. Nico, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I particularly like taking these steps to get those quick looks on pivot points, or at least to get pivot points, because you've just showed us in like under 5 or 10 minutes that you can grab a vast amount of data and quickly visualize it, which will give you your next step to pivot into, and you probably end up to the dead end, but you can easily go back to that graph, take a step back, and go into the other pivot point.
Yep. And I think one of the other things that I could do, I wanted to just make this fast so that we could get into the Maltego tool just for a second. But one of the things that I should have done is clean up the data a little bit. Maybe if I know that all of those, anything that's CSC corporate or corporate, whatever, I could rename all of those to be the exact same thing. That way the outliers show up even more. If I'm okay with tampering with that data that I've harvested, because sometimes the tells are the important part. Like, hey, it's a CSC incorporated. Well, hey, that was done at a certain date and time, or what other things. Yeah. Also, we can change how we link things together. I chose to link a domain to a registrar and to a date. We could have done a domain to a registrar and then a registrar to a date, because the registrar actually registered the thing on a date and pivot on the date. So a lot of cool things we can do with that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now we did have a question from somebody that asked Lightbulb asked, hey, what about OneNote? And the long and the short of it is, use what works for you for documentation. Some of the tools are going to be more effective or going to save you time. One of the biggest time savers is, well, one of our sponsors, Hunchly. It documents, it hashes, it extracts data. It makes your job easier. So you choose what you want to do. I mean, if you want to use TextPad or Notepad++ for your documentation, you do you. But I'm telling you that mind maps and Hunchly and some of the other tools that we have out there, like Paliscope and other ones, they make it simpler. So you focus on the OSINT instead of having to focus on documentation.
Yeah.
Is that your experience too, Nico?
Yeah, especially that. But sometimes, from time to time, what I do, sometimes I travel by public transport, for instance, and I'm scrolling around on the various social media and something gets my attention. Then I want to pivot into at that moment in time. Then I'll just do a small notepad on my phone and just, this is my question. to myself, which I want to have an answer to, and I write that down, and now I'm going to look into this resource, and these are the answers I gain from that. So then you don't need mind mapping at all that stuff.
Yeah, sometimes you need to the formalized process.
Yeah,
and sometimes you just need to write stuff down. But it is very important in a lot of the work that we do to note where you got things, when you got things. You can take screenshots and you can copy those, but Justin Seitz has a great article or blog post, I think, that he wrote about some Canadian law enforcement officers that didn't realize that when they were doing screenshots of things, they weren't actually downloading the real file. So you're not getting potential metadata, you're not getting other things from the original. And I think when they went to court, there were some issues there since they were using like Snagit or something. Cool.
Yeah, but also what you just pointed out, once you start merging entities, for instance, you just said the corporations. There's nothing wrong with doing that in an analytical track that you have done it, because when it comes to you having to go to court, for instance, you must be able to show that in that moment in time, you made the decision to merge those entities based on the inside. So
you broke up a little bit there, big guy. Your video.
Okay.
But I think what you're saying is that it's okay for you to change the data to analyze it in different ways, provided that one, you keep the original copy untampered with if you're going to court, but also two, because you need to change the data to look at things in different perspectives and show your thought process. Is that kind of where you were going?
Yeah. Process, right? You got pieces of the puzzle and you want to connect those pieces of the puzzle together to make it a whole. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So any of our studio audience want anything more on that? Do y'all want to see Hunchley? I know that lots of people have already seen Hunchley and all, but we can show. We're always happy to pull out Hunchley, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm not seeing anybody. They're all frantically like typing right now, probably. Cool. Well, Nico, do you have anything else you want to show? Anything you want to talk about?
No, not at this moment in time. I think if someone attending or watching this later has a particular question, I'm more than happy to do a 10-minute tip or something.
You could do one on documentation.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right, we're going to expect that. All right, well, if that's all, Nico, then how about we say goodbye to the nice people?
Yeah, thanks everybody for attending again.
Yeah. Nico, do you have any places where people can go to see you?
Yes, they do. The 30th and the 31st of October, I'll be at the Infosecurity conference in the Netherlands. It's one of the largest Infosecurity conferences. I'll be doing talk on open source intelligence, and I'll be at the digital experience in the Netherlands from Data Experts, talking on behalf of Bellingcat. So
nice.
That's
the
it.
Places to go see Nico live and in person.
Yeah.
Now, are you bald in person too, or is this just what you do for the?
Only in the weekends.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Okay.
Fair enough. Cool. And I will just let people know that I have classes all over the world for my Sec 487 class. I'm headed out to Baltimore in like 3 weeks. Happy to see some faces out there, and then Singapore and Australia.
I'll be in London in November for your class. Yeah.
Nice. Oh yeah. You can go see Nico in London too. You're such a world traveler. Yeah. All right. Well, we should probably just say goodbye then. Thank you very much to our studio audience. Oh, before we go, let's just go ahead and note that we have 2 new patrons, Ricardo Murillo and Medical.
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated.
For helping support us in our project and for making all of this possible. Thanks to our sponsors, Hunchley and Sands, and thank you mostly to you all that make it worth writing and doing these podcasts, because when we see your questions, when we see you all being #OSINTCurious, it makes us smile.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, everybody, take care and stay OSINT curious.
Bye.